I wanna just add one other guy in because we talked about him at the beginning of the year, or excuse me, beginning of the episode. But Prince Strawn coming over from Boise State, because I feel like for him, he to me feels like the three. I mean, I think Lake McCree is your third receiver, but I think your third wide receiver is Prince Strawn because of the size he gives you in the red zone. I think, like we talked about it with Deuce Robinson, that ability as well, having Jacoby Lane and Robinson on the wings and what you could get. I think you lose Robinson, you add in Strawn. I think it's a downgrade, but I don't think it's that big of a downgrade because we didn't see what Strawn could really do at Boise State with Ashton Genty just like being the heartbeat of that offense.
Yeah, no, I kind of agree with that. I mean, Deuce Robinson, he was good. He wasn't great. It wasn't enough to get into this lineup more. And I do think a guy like Strawn is the perfect combination. I mean, we talked about it last week. Having in the red zone guys, you have Jacoby. If you put out wide, Jacoby Lane, Prince Strawn, then you also have Lake McCree. That's like 6'5", 6'4", 6'6". I want to say Lake McCree. I'm not. How tall is he? How tall is Lake McCree?
He's up
6'4". But you put all of them, that's really hard to guard in the red zone when you're matching up one-on-one with these guys. It feels like something where they can create enough space, just get your long arms out there, get a touchdown. So I like the addition of a Deuce Robinson-esque player. Obviously not Deuce Robinson, but someone who plays similar to him, who has that similar frame.
Yeah, and I think we don't have to go too deep into Maava today, but I think he's a big part of this as well because I felt like one thing with Maava that I didn't love last year was his decision making sometimes. Yeah. And I think when you have at your disposal Jacoby Lane and Mekhi Lemon, you have to make the right read because they're so different, So I think that is one variable that really factors in. Jay Fair is another one we could talk about. I mean, really small role last year, probably will have an even smaller role this year. He had one touchdown. It was a good touchdown at Michigan. Just didn't have that
smaller.
Much. I think it's smaller because you bring in. I mean, look, I want to preface this by saying it all comes down to what Lincoln Riley's approach is. Because if Lincoln Riley throws the ball 50 times a game again, then his role will be bigger. Yeah. But if Lincoln says, I have two of some of the top receivers in the Big Ten, and I also have a decent running back core, then I don't really think that that Jay Fair will see the field much. I also don't think that, I think if they go with more of a running approach, I think we'll see more of Lake McCree also because he's a good blocker. Yeah. But let's talk about Lake McCree while we're at it. I mean, we've kind of bounced around, but he's a guy that I think I said earlier could be that number 3 receiver, that number 3 option. The O-line struggled last year. Lake McCree was pretty good at coming in and blocking as a tight end. The tight end group is really deep. And Lake McCree's kind of your typical tight end. He's nothing like special about him, but he's just really consistent. And we saw him get injured early on in the season, and he never really came back from that. No touchdowns on the year. They didn't really use him much in the red zone. What do you see his role sort of being like? He's, of course, a veteran on this team, a guy that could really mentor some of the younger guys, especially some of the other tight ends. Where do you see him fitting in? Do you agree that he could be the third receiver for this team?
I totally think he could. I mean, it's the veteran guy in this pass catching locker room. Last year, we really thought he was going to emerge quickly as Miller Moss's favorite target. Obviously, he had the injury problems, but those first 2 games, he was fantastic, and he was clearly the guy who was Miller Moss's safety valve. So he very much, personally, I like tight ends who are the quarterback's safety. If there's nowhere else to throw, you throw to your big pass catching tight end, a Lake McCree type player who can bail you out and at least get a couple yards on a play where maybe you lose yards or maybe you have to throw it out of bounds, whatever it is. So I think it's very possible Lake McCree is used. It's of course it's really contingent on if he can stay on the field. But if he can, get over those injuries, which that's no small feat. But if he can, then he can be a fantastic player. Obviously, we've talked about the red zone a lot with him, but even just short yard situations. I like plays where, it's like tight end leaks, stuff like that in short yardage where, do a play action, hit the tight end, get the first down, whatever it is. So I'd like to see him used a lot more. Obviously, these tight ends are fantastic. So I'd really like to see a lot of Lake McCree.
Yeah, and maybe to cut Miller Moss a little bit of slack last year. Look, he had some bad decisions down the stretch in a lot of those games, But there were a lot of situations that if Lake McCree was on the field, or even like Walker Lyons was running a somewhat, medium route, Lake McCree or Miller Moss would have not forced a ball into coverage. And we saw him do that a lot. And Mayava is a different quarterback than Moss, but he has sort of that same, tendency to sometimes force balls. So I want to see, like you said, I want to see sort of Lake McCree, and maybe we'll see who kind of comes out of the slot a bit more. Maybe Makai Lemon is more of a gadget guy in the backfield, but maybe they find a guy like Xavier Jordan to be someone who could step up big for him in the slot. He's only 5'11". Let's talk about him. I mean, of course, he was a big recruit for USC a couple of years ago. Comes in, red shirts out of Sierra Canyon, 4-star. I've had the chance to watch some of his tape, and he definitely plays a lot bigger than his 5'11" frame. Now, granted, it's hard to sort of judge that when you're playing against high school kids because a lot of these guys are shorter and smaller, but he's very skilled. He can win jump balls, maybe not in the same way that Jacoby Lane can, because Jacoby Lane's
that's a rough comparison.
Well, I mean,
it's hard. What I'm saying is, like, it's hard to compare someone to Jacoby.
Yeah, but it's high school. It's high school. But the point is, he plays bigger than his frame, and I could see him, very much kind of being a Makai Lemon Jr. of, like, learning a lot behind Makai Lemon. They're about the same size, and Xavier Jordan has a lot of speed. He can run well after the catch. I think he definitely wants to add some size, but I think he definitely could be a wild card. I mean, last year we didn't really always see in the wide receiver rotation. We just didn't always see a guy be that wild card till late in the year. Like, we saw Makai Lemon step up huge late in the year, but there wasn't a guy. I mean, I talked about the LSU game. There wasn't really a guy through those first few weeks that, like, could come out of nowhere and make a play. Like, it was always, like, pretty consistent early on. And we saw Makai Lemon get hot. We saw Jacoby Lane, pretty consistent throughout the year. I want to see a guy like Xavier Jordan or Corey Sims, who we can talk about in a moment, step up and be that sort of spark plug. Like, USC needs a big 15-yard play on third down. Let's throw it to Xavier Jordan and see what happens. I'd love to see that.
Yeah, I mean, I would love. Yeah, obviously you can wish for like a wild card type of guy. I think you're kind of counting last year on like a Zachariah Branch of like this game breaker of he can get the ball in his hands and he'll go. I don't disagree that I think he could. That I think Xavier Jordan could be like that. It's so the problem is it's hard to evaluate like a guy like him, Tanuk Hines, someone like that, because they haven't touched they haven't touched the college football field yet. As in, not really. It's hard to evaluate what they're going to do and how they can actually contribute to the team. We know what Jacoby Lane does. We know what Makai Lemon does. We know what Prince Stratton does. We don't know what a lot of these receivers do, and that's probably my only aversion to them right now and saying that it's like a deep class, because I think the top three, and I'll put Lake McCree in there, I'll say top four, really solid. I can count on all of them. What happens when you need others? You don't know. That's the problem. You don't know yet.
Yeah, and we didn't have a spring game this year either, so that's also hard.
Yeah.
We did have one last year, and Xavier Jordan did play in that. Of course, that was about a year ago at this point.
A year ago, yeah.
And he did look good in that, as I remember. I was up in the press box, and I remember Xavier Jordan.
I remember that.
You were right next to me. Yeah, indeed. And Xavier Jordan, I thought, I had a feeling he was going to redshirt just because I knew they had a plethora of receiver options, but he looked pretty solid in that. And so I don't know, take it for what it's worth. Corey Sims, though, has been a guy that's been talked about a lot in spring camp, just for, Tanuk Hines as well. But I feel like Corey Sims, just because he has that 6'3" size, he's versatile. And I mean, we talk about Xavier Jordan being Makai Lemon Jr., sort of smaller version of him. I think Corey Sims is sort of like emulates a bit of that Jacoby Lane ability. He plays a bit more in the slot than out wide, but he has the hands that Jacoby Lane has. He has the frame. He can win those one-on-one balls. And he's not a guy that's super fast. I mean, Jacoby Lane's not the fastest guy, but he's shifty. He can make those plays. I think just giving a guy like Mayava as many options as he can have. I mean, I think, injuries are always a factor as well. I think Corey Sims is another guy who, might not play much at all this year, but, if he does, you're going to look to him sort of inside the 20 to make that big play for you when guys are double teaming Jacoby Lane. Because last year, I mean, they knew how good Jacoby Lane was, but it was sort of his breakout show, right? I mean, he didn't play much his freshman year. So I think now teams are going to be prepared for Jacoby Lane and what he has up his sleeve, because he's kind of a tricky guy to face. So yeah. I think that kind of brings in guys like Corey Sims, where it's like, he can play kind of similar to Jacoby.
Yeah, I mean, like we've been saying, we're just looking for that guy, one of these freshmen, the Tanook Hines, the Corey Sims, to step up off. I'm not going to say the bench because they will probably get snaps just because of the inexperience, I'll say, on this USC team. I don't disagree that he has that. He definitely has like a similar frame in all to Jacoby Lane. It's hard to judge, as we've been saying, these high schoolers of what they can do, because in high school you can do it all. You are what the reason you are coming to USC, the reason you're coming to a Power 5 school is because you were that good at everything in high school. So it's hard to judge maybe what he'll do. I want to see someone come in and be that Jacoby Lane type player who can get those 50-50 balls, because it can't only be him. Because right now, I think Lemons obviously is pretty underrated at those 50-50 balls. If I don't know if you agree with that. I just think back to like that one Holiday Bowl catch. He had like a really deep one. Miller Moss kind of lobbed it over two defenders. Great catch. Anyways, it was a ramble. I would like to see a player who can come in and be not Jacoby Lane, but someone who can at least supplement him. As you just said, like like Xavier Jordan and Makai Lemon Jr., maybe someone like Corey Sims can be a Jacoby Lane Jr., something like that.
Yeah, and I mean, you also want to build for the future, because I mean, we can kind of safely assume that if Makai Lemon and Jacoby Lane have good seasons, they're probably going to go to the NFL after this year.
I assume so.
Pending anything. I mean, maybe there's always the talk of transfers, but they're probably. I mean, they feel NFL ready. Is my point. I think Makai Lemon for sure. I think Jacoby just needs a little bit more versatility to his game, we'll say. A couple more guys we haven't touched on too much yet. Walker Lyons. I liked him a lot as a blocker. I think especially would have been the strong side block on the left side of the line. I thought he did a really good job last year. I mean, we obviously saw Elijah Page struggle on the left tackle, and he's put on some muscle. He seems like he's supposed to be a lot better this year. But I liked Walker Lyons in a 2 tight end set, or even just one, coming out and blocking on the left side. I thought he did a great job. I think it was the Nebraska game. I was particularly fond of his game. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on him. And then Zacharias Williams coming over a couple days ago in the transfer portal. He was supposed to be Utah's wide receiver 1 potentially. Probably won't play much at USC.
Yeah, it's hard to assume with him. He's I want to say LA, at least Southern California kid. So it makes sense you want to come back to USC. It does feel like a depth add, I won't lie, because it didn't feel like it doesn't feel like it's not a game changer. There was that receiver Trevor Pena, the guy he was Syracuse transfer, just committed to Penn State. It was reported USC was in the mix for him. I actually was kind of not rooting for that, I'm going to be honest, because he had a very good year at Syracuse. It felt like it would have taken away from Makai Lemon and Jacoby Lane's snaps. So I was actually completely fine with him not coming to USC. But anyways, this feels like a depth add. He had as far as freshman years goes, he had like 100 yards, 2 touchdowns, I want to say. Is that right? Something like that. It feels like building for the future, like that type of ad. So I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he only played 3 games last year. His best game came against UCF. It was a win for Utah, and he had 72 yards on 6 receptions. He also had a 33-yard grab. Other than that, he only had 4 more catches outside of that in 2 other games. So, yeah, probably a depth add, and you can understand. I mean, the skill is there. That's why, Utah is kind of in a weird phase for their football team. Going to have a new quarterback. They brought in 3 transfer quarterbacks next year. That probably was a turnoff for him. Maybe he wanted to go where, home was, and clearly he did. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's a good ad just because the depth at receiver just was looking bare. I mean, you wanna have those, direct, playing time for Makai Lemon and Jacoby Lane. But what happens when one of those guys gets hurt? You're in a big hole, I think. And you never want to like jinx it, right? So I'm not gonna like say too much, but like if one of those guys gets hurt, like USC would have a big hole to fill. And we saw that last year, even though USC had a pretty good, array of receivers, they still had holes. Like they still had, just the inability to get the ball downfield sometimes. And some of that came with the quarterback play, but a lot of that too was like they didn't really discover Makai Lemon until later in the year. And then once they did, he played a lot better, right? And we knew Jacoby Lane was good. So yeah, I think a guy like Williams could come in and create that play, when called upon. We saw Jay Fair do that a couple of times last year. And, I think him and Williams have sort of similar playing time. But yeah, I mean, because I always look at ourlads.com for the depth charts. They're not always accurate, and they haven't added in the Zacharias Williams transfer in yet, but they have Strawn at the starting X receiver. They have Jacoby Lane as the Z, and they have Mekhi Lemon as the Y with Lake McCree as the starting tight end. And then the two deep, I guess we could say, they have Corey Sims at the X. They have Xavier Jordan at the Z. They have Jay Fair at the Y. And again, that doesn't factor in Zacharias Williams because he's not official yet. And then the backup tight end, they have Walker Lyons. Does anything stand out to you there? Just the two deep group, I guess you could say, for the pass catchers?
Yeah, I do like the experience with Jay Fair behind Mekhi Lemon because it is at least a decent, a guy who has seen the field with USC a little bit. I think we haven't talked about two of the other freshman receivers, Tanuk Hines and Romero Eisen. I've been reading up on those guys. Those dudes can go. I don't know if you've seen like their track times because they're both sprinters, both sub 11 100-yard dashes. Meter, is it meter in America? I forget what it is. I think it's 100 yards. Assume it's 100 yards. That's what a football is. Those guys can go. A thing that Lincoln Riley has done a lot in his play calling, I'm personally not a fan of it, is like the bubble screens. He's done a lot of them. I personally don't love it. It does, however, when you get those guys into space, those quick guys, when you could get Zachariah Branch, when you can get Mekhi Lemon into space, they are dangerous with the ball. I would like to see Eisen and Hines with the ball in those bubble screen scenarios because I thought Lincoln Riley overused them last year. I don't know if you feel the same way. I thought this is a conversation for a different time. I wasn't a big fan of Lincoln Riley's play calling. I think it's dropped off a lot since when I was a freshman. When it's hard when Caleb Williams is quarterback, but I think I would like to see those guys get the ball with space in front of them, with green grass to go, because they can go. They are quick. Get the ball in their hands, let them go. That's how I'd like to see a lot of those freshmen used, like personally.
Yeah, I agree. And I think I have some mixed feelings on the bubble screen thing because I don't mind them too much as long as they're not being thrown to Lake McCree. Because it's like we saw that so many times last year. And McCree don't get me wrong, he's a great football player, but he's not fast.
Tight end bubble screen just makes no sense. It doesn't work ever. Unless you have a Brock Bowers, a Kyle Pitts, it doesn't work. With all due respect to Lake McCree, it just doesn't work that much.
I think that's something that could have worked well maybe with Deuce Robinson because a lot of people sort of touted him as a tight end.
Yeah, he was on most major recruiting sites. He was actually a tight end coming out of high school. So but he's skinny, obviously.
But like you said, Eson and Hines, both 4 stars and pretty big too because both were talking with SC rivals. I know Eson was pretty close to signing with Penn State, and then Hines was pretty close in talking with Notre Dame, I believe.
He's really heavily on Notre Dame, yeah.
Yeah, and so I think that's big for the future too because, Longstreet, you want to keep him engaged and involved, and that's probably your future offense in some capacity. You'll probably bring in a transfer if we're looking way ahead, and then you also have the 26 class as well. So, I think as far as the receiving room goes, you don't have a ton of depth in terms of guys that have proven themselves, but you have a lot of depth in terms of guys that have really looked good out of high school and that have been highly recruited. And so I don't know. I don't know if you have thoughts on that, just sort of depth overall. Because, you look at the depth chart and the only guy we haven't talked about is just Josiah Zamora, who probably won't play much at all this year. And again, I don't even know if he'll step foot on the field, but respectfully. But tight ends as well. You have Joey Olson, redshirt freshman, Walter Matthews, redshirt freshman. These are guys that, could
pretty highly recruited guys who I feel like obviously it was Matthews more than than Olson. There's a lot of potential in that tight end room. Casey, you were talking about earlier, it's one of the deeper rooms, and a lot of that is based off potential of what we saw in high school. So I think it's super possible that a lot of those guys could break out. Obviously, if a Lake McCree, he struggled with injuries, and this is knock on wood, anything happens to him, I think there's plenty of backups behind him who can really have those breakout years.
Yeah, if you lose Lake McCree, you lose the leadership and you lose the consistency. But you bring in, again, Lyons was not a guy who was catching a ton of footballs. He also wasn't utilized a ton in receiving plays, but he can block well.
And he only played 3 games, I think.
Yeah. McCree wasn't out that long, but his injury was pretty scary, and he just didn't feel like the same player when he came back. Like he had that helmet to knee play at Michigan, I believe, and
Yeah.
that was the same game Makai Lemon, I think, was in concussion protocol.
Yeah, after the punt return. Yeah. You're right.
Yeah. And so maybe that approach changes. I mean, we're seeing this USC football program change a lot with Chad Bowden coming in. Maybe the Lincoln Riley, maybe he's talked to Lincoln Riley, and I don't want to speculate, but maybe like because I mean, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And if Lincoln Riley has Jaden Mayava throwing the ball 50 times this year, I don't care if it's Makai Lemon and Jacoby Lane each catching 25. They're probably not going to win the football game because guys are going to figure that out, especially if they have a good backfield.
They should not be throwing especially I feel bad because we've talked about I feel bad for Miller because making him throw the ball 50 times was ridiculous. I don't expect them to do that with Jaden. Obviously, he's a lot more versatile. And we'll get into our pass catchers episode some other time. But I do think we talked about this a tiny bit. I think the connection between Mayava, Lane, and Lemon is going to be so much better this year. Obviously, it was solid towards the end of the year. Both Lemon and Lane were really good towards the end of the year. But now you get a full off season with Mayava, and they had played those games already in the season. So you know exactly what you're getting with the quarterback wide receiver connection. I think it's gonna be a lot better.
I agree. And I think, I mean, a lot of because it sounds ideal, right? Like it sounds so ideal. Like you have Makai Lemon, you have Jacoby Lane. Like who's stopping that in the Big Ten? But at the same time, it's like the two big X factors, and we sort of already talked about this, so not to be sort of redundant here, but the two big X factors are like Lincoln Riley and Jaden Mayava. Because if Jaden Mayava isn't the quarterback we think he is, that's going to change things. If Lincoln Riley is being petty, for lack of a better term, and just, trying to give other guys chances when they don't need it, that's where we'll see the holes come into place. But again, the reason why, and my take on this is the reason why a lot of experts are saying USC could go 9-3 this year or 10-2 is solely because you make a face at that.
Who was saying that? I haven't seen that. I've mostly just seen negative things about USC.
You and I,
they're true. I'm just like, well, I've heard.
I mean, look, 9-3. We already talked about the schedule, but like you lose to Illinois, Oregon, and Notre Dame. We'll say. So okay, maybe I'd say the reason why maybe I'll rephrase that. The reason why people are saying that USC can have a winning record and potentially contend for the college football playoff this year is because solely of Makai Lemon and Jacoby Lane being the top two wideouts. I know there's a lot of other positional depth on this team, the running back position, the tight end position, the defensive line, but those two are the game changers on this team. Like there's not a lot of other guys on this team I could confidently say you could put into a game and they're immediately going to change it. I think Jacoby has the ability to change a game with one catch. I want to see Jacoby Lane change games with 5 catches this year, and not just from inside the 50-yard line in the opponent's end. I want to see him do it, when USC is on its own 25. I want to see them come out. I mean, it just felt like so many times last year that Woody Marks was saving them. He was bailing them out of these wasted drives because USC would throw the ball, 2 screens on 1st and 10 and then on 2nd and 10, and they wouldn't get anything. And they'd get a nice run from Woody or whatever on 3rd and maybe have a chance to get a first down. But I want to see them chuck the ball deep. I mean, seriously, we didn't see that from them at all. And we saw that from Caleb Williams. Why not bring that back? We know that Mayava was able to do that at UNLV.
In fairness, it's hard to compare Caleb Williams to 4 games of Jaden Mayava.
No, sure. But I mean, we saw Miller Moss not be able to do that.
Yeah.
And
also,
Mayava, to his credit, had a pretty good showing when he came in. I mean, he lost, 1 game when he came in? Nebraska, won Nebraska, he lost Notre Dame, beat Nebraska.
He
was 2-1, right?
In Texas A&M. Let's say 3-1.
He was 3-1 and really could have been undefeated if they beat Notre Dame. And I mean,
if he didn't throw 2 pick sixes at their doorstep.
And that's where we talk about decision making. So, I think it comes full circle in our conversation here. The fact that, Mayava's decision making will be helped a lot by the fact that he's going to have a 1A and 1B.
Yeah.
That's so different.
So my problem the last year specifically, and actually I'll say 2 years ago, the last 2 years, because 2022, Caleb Williams, Jordan Addison, The number one thing about Jordan Addison that I always love, obviously he missed a little time with injury in that Utah game, missed Arizona and one other, I want to say, two others, Cal and Colorado. The one thing about Jordan Addison, if we needed a first down on 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, whatever it was, Jordan Addison was open. And Caleb, you knew where he was going, and the defense wasn't going to stop it. Now, obviously, it's comparing the Pac-12, Big Ten, defenses are different. That is what I want to see from Jacoby Lane and Mekhi Lemon. I want to see someone always open on 3rd down when the team needs it. It's a lot to ask, comparing them to Jordan Addison, a phenomenal receiver, obviously the Biletnikoff the year before at Pitt, and he's been great in the NFL. I want to see that from Jacoby Lane and Mekhi Lemon. I want to see someone who is going to consistently get open on 3rd down. Yes, you can get the touchdowns, all sorts of that stuff. It's the plays like converting on 3rd and 8 when it's like mid-3rd or early 4th that really matter, and I want to see that.
Yeah, and I'd argue that last year, I mean, obviously you don't have a Jordan Addison on the team, but I'd argue that was Kyron Hudson.
Yeah.
And then the year before that, Brendan Rice,
Taj Washington. But like, it wasn't the same as Jordan Addison. That's kind of what I'm saying. And obviously, like we said, it's hard to compare those guys to Jordan Addison, a guy who is a very solid second option in the NFL. So it's hard to compare. But I think both Lane and Lemon are good enough to do that. So
I would love Lake McCree to be that guy this year, because I think he's a guy who you're not really expecting to run after catch that much anyways. If you need a safety guy, a safety valve.
Yeah, that's what I was saying like earlier. I'd like to see that.
Or maybe not even safety valve, but like maybe you're in a bind. Maybe it's 3rd and 15, you're on your own 20. Like I want to see like Lake McCree find some open space, go toward the sideline on the right side, maybe have Mayava roll out a little bit. I mean, of course you maybe want to throw to Jacoby in that way, or in that situation, but I think a guy like McCree gives you a lot of positional flexibility. So yeah, I think the point we're trying to make here is USC has not really had a guy like Jordan Addison in a while. And they also didn't really bring in, these past few years, any big transfers, on the receiving end.
Obviously that first year you bring in Caleb Williams and Jordan Addison, it's hard to hate on that.
Yeah, it's hard to top that. And then, I mean, you thought you were going to get Jerome Miles. Like there's just they've lost a lot of receivers to commitments in these past few years. I know they lost that kid to Oregon. I forget his name, blanking on it, but it was this class, I believe. It happened a while ago. I was reading up on it. I forget the name, but the point I'm trying to make is you don't have necessarily the defined answer if you have an NFL caliber receiver. We think that Jacoby Lane and Mekhi Lemon can be those guys, but we still need to see some more. So yeah, it's gonna be an exciting year for the pass catchers. I think this is like the first year since that 2022. Obviously we've had a couple seasons since then that you really look at this receiving room and you say, wow, this team has some really good ballers. Like they have guys that can go out and
win you the game.
Win you some games. Yeah. And I think like you could sort of say the same thing about Washington and Rice, but like you're downgrading from Jordan Addison to that. You're upgrading this year.
Both of those guys are good, and like they're not seeing the field much in the NFL. I think I can speak for both of us. We easily think that both Lemon and Lane are day 1, day 2 at minimum, in my opinion, picks.
Yep. And I think back to this comment for a moment, I think the theme of the pass catching room is addition by subtraction. Like you have a couple guys walk, they don't want to buy into the program. So be it. Right. I mean, you have a couple of guys who can step up. You have some freshmen that are looking really good in spring camp. A lot of time till the season starts. We'll still have fall practices and summer stuff going on. But man, I think it's an exciting time for the USC offense. And I think the pass catching room and the wide receivers and the tight ends really make up what could be a deep group this year.
Yeah. I mean, like we've said, it's a position group that can go out and win you games. I think it's definitely the best. Obviously, these guys were freshmen your freshman year, and they were my sophomore year. It's the best it's been. I think this is the best team USC has seen since that 2022 year. And obviously, the defense held them down pretty heavily that year. So I think the defense will be elite, and I think the receiving room will make up for a decent offense. That's what I'll say about that.